Mariana Baza, a 19-year-old physiotherapy student, studied at a private university near her hometown of Bariri. Born in 2000, she was the only child of Ayrton and Marlene Forty, a couple devoted to their daughter. Her family described her as a bright, kind, and compassionate person, always full of smiles and warm words. Her love for physiotherapy went beyond just choosing a career. It reflected her caring personality and desire to help others heal and find relief from pain. Her parents were immensely proud of her dedication. At university, she was a hardworking student who managed to balance her studies with an active social life. She made friends easily, whether at school or at the gym where she worked out regularly. Mariana had been in a 3-year relationship with her boyfriend, Jefferson Viana. At 22, Jefferson was serving in the Brazilian Navy in São Paulo. The two had met in their late teens and built a strong relationship founded on mutual respect and shared aspirations. They were a loving couple, often sending each other playful messages and celebrating life's milestones together. On the morning of September 24, 2019, Mariana and Jefferson were exchanging their usual texts. While they faced challenges like any young couple, especially the distance caused by his Navy duties, they maintained their bond through calls and messages. There were no signs of any issues between them. They were happy and planning their future together. That morning, everything in Bariri seemed normal. Around 7 a.m., the sun was just beginning to rise, and Mariana was already starting her day. She was at the gym with her friend, Heloisa Passarello, fitting in an early workout to clear her mind and stay active. The gym was a familiar place for Mariana, where she often balanced exercise with catching up with friends. By 8 a.m., the workout was over. At 8:11 a.m., Mariana walked out of the gym, with Heloisa following a few steps behind. The street outside was quiet, lined with homes and a few parked cars. Mariana, carrying her phone, appeared to be checking notifications or organizing her thoughts about the day ahead, classes, assignments, and maybe a quick text to Jefferson. She was focused, with a busy schedule ahead. As she approaches the car, the camera catches her slowing down, her head tilted slightly as if noticing something unusual. At 8:12 a.m., she stopped at the front passenger side of her Volkswagen. Her tire was completely flat, so deflated it would be impossible to drive. Heloisa lingered near the gym entrance, watching Mariana by her car. Mariana looked more annoyed than worried. Surveillance footage showed her pulling out her phone, possibly deciding who to call for help, maybe her dad, her reliable go-to for car issues, or her cousin, who lived nearby. However, she didn't make a call, at least not right away. The street wasn't empty. The footage captured a man crossing from the opposite sidewalk toward Mariana's car. He was dressed casually in jeans and a plain shirt. However, the cameras couldn't clearly capture his face due to the distance and grainy quality of the feed. He approached Mariana directly, calm and purposeful, exuding a friendly demeanor as he offered to help with her flat tire. Mariana hesitated. She was not naive and was thinking whether to drive to her father's house or call someone she felt she could trust. However, the man was persistent. He warns her that driving on a flat tire could damage the wheel, making her believe that he truly cares about her. Around 8:15 a.m., Heloisa, Mariana's friend, had to leave for work. She got on her motorcycle and rode off. Meanwhile, the man continued speaking with Mariana, his gestures becoming more animated as he attempted to convince her. By 8:28 a.m., the situation shifted. Footage from the gym's cameras showed the man pointing across the street toward a small chakra, a rural property with a house and some land. He claimed he could properly fix the tire there and persuaded Mariana to follow him. Although hesitant and cautious, Mariana eventually agreed. At 8:29 a.m., she drove her Volkswagen across the street into the chakra's yard. Once she entered, the gate closed behind her, and her car disappeared from the camera's view. That was the last time Mariana was seen alive in public. The chakra's yard, hidden by walls and the closed gate, was a blind spot, outside the coverage of the gyms and nearby cameras. The street soon returned to its normal routine, unaware of the danger unfolding just out of sight. Before disappearing, Mariana had taken a picture of the man kneeling by her car and sent it to her boyfriend, Jefferson. Their conversation was lighthearted, typical of their 3-year relationship. Mariana didn't seem fearful when she sent the photo. Instead, she laughed about the situation. Jefferson didn't sense any danger either. By noon, Jefferson tried messaging Mariana again but got no response. Her phone, usually active with notifications, was completely silent. He called her, but the call went directly to voicemail. Later, he recalled noticing that her phone appeared to have no signal, a detail that would continue to haunt him. His concern grew as the hours passed. Mariana was supposed to attend her physiotherapy classes in Bauru, a 30-mile drive from her hometown of Bariri. She had never missed a class without notifying someone beforehand. By 2 p.m., Jefferson began contacting her friends to see if anyone had heard from her, but no one had. Growing increasingly worried, he reached out to her family, including her parents, Ayrton and Marlene, as well as her aunts and cousins, all of whom were very close to her and maintained regular contact. The family grew equally alarmed. Her father, Ayrton, repeatedly tried calling her, but her phone remained off. By 3 p.m., the family was convinced that something was seriously wrong. They contacted the Bariri police to report Mariana missing and emphasized the urgency of the situation. The police promptly filed a missing persons report and began gathering information from her close contacts. Jefferson was interviewed first. He shared the photo and text messages Mariana had sent him that morning. The photo, time-stamped around 8:30 a.m., showed a man crouched next to Mariana's Volkswagen, working on a tire. His face was partially visible, but the angle of the photo made it difficult to identify him. Jefferson told the police that everything had seemed normal. Mariana hadn't appeared uncomfortable, and the man looked like a helpful passerby. The police considered the photo an important lead, but more information was needed. They asked Jefferson if Mariana had any enemies or recent conflicts. He insisted that she was well-liked and had no issues in her personal life, adding that their relationship was happy and stable. His alibi was verified, as he was in Sao Paulo fulfilling his naval duties at the time. His colleagues confirmed his whereabouts. Investigators then spoke to one of Mariana's gym friends, Heloisa, who had been with her earlier that morning. Heloisa confirmed the timeline of the incident. Mariana had finished her workout around 8 a.m., and they chatted briefly before stepping outside together. It was then that Mariana noticed the flat tire on her car. A man approached and offered to help her. Heloisa did not recognize the man, but she described him as friendly and non-threatening in appearance. She recalled that Mariana was hesitant at first but eventually let him assist after he pointed out that driving on the flat tire could damage the wheel. She left around 8:15 a.m., assuming everything was fine. Later, when speaking to the police, she expressed deep guilt, wishing she had stayed with Mariana longer. Heloisa's description of the man was vague: average height, casual clothes. However, it matched the person in the photo Mariana had sent to Jefferson. When police asked Heloisa for more information, asking if she had noticed anyone else in the area or anything suspicious, she mentioned only a few people exercising and passers-by, but did not see anything unusual. The busy morning traffic made spotting anything unusual difficult. The police reviewed the gym's CCTV footage, which showed Mariana driving into a nearby property, referred to as the Chakra, at 8:29 a.m. They visited the location, which was owned by a local resident who had hired a handyman, Rodrigo Pereira Alves, to paint it. The owner confirmed that Rodrigo had been there that morning but said he had since disappeared. The officers inspected the area but found no signs of Mariana or her car. However, another surveillance tape revealed her Volkswagen being driven away an hour later. The footage showed the driver stepping out briefly, and their clothing made it clear the driver was not Mariana. The photo Mariana had sent to Jefferson became critical evidence. Police have secretly launched an investigation into the man in the photo without releasing his identity to avoid exposure. They discovered he had a criminal history, including serious offenses, which raised suspicions. The flat tire, possibly deliberately slashed, suggested a premeditated plan rather than a random event. The police initiated covert surveillance near the suspect's last known location while tracking Mariana's phone. Its last signal came from the gym's area and went offline around 8:36 a.m., likely turned off or destroyed. Knowing her car had been driven away, officers issued an alert to neighboring towns with details about the Volkswagen and the man in the photo, now their primary suspect. The car was last seen heading west toward Itapolis. In response, authorities expanded the search operation, deploying reinforcements, including a helicopter and additional officers. By 5 p.m., word had already spread quickly throughout Bariri. Everyone was talking animatedly, texting, and trying to piece together the details of the event. They were tracking a car and following clues from a photo. Soon, a name surfaced: Rodrigo Pereira Alves. He was a career criminal with a long history of offenses, including robbery, kidnapping, extortion, and attempted robbery. He had served 12 years in prison and had been released just 30 days before Mariana's kidnapping. The photo Mariana had sent matched him, as did footage from nearby CCTV cameras. As the evening progressed, the search intensified. By 8 p.m., the effort was relentless, with helicopters in the air and patrol teams on the ground. At around 9 p.m., the search team located the Volkswagen abandoned in Itapolis, near a sugarcane plantation. The car was immediately secured, and forensic investigators began their work. The vehicle was found with its doors unlocked, keys missing, and interior in disarray. Evidence showed a violent struggle had taken place, with scratches on the dashboard, torn seatbelts, and severe damage to the interior of the car. Under the seat, police found a knife, though it wasn't believed to have been used in the crime. There was no blood, but the evidence made it clear something serious had taken place. After discovering the car, authorities intensified their pursuit of Rodrigo. He had grown up in a troubled home, dropped out of school early, and turned to crime as a teenager. Known as a loner, he worked sporadic jobs in construction and mechanics but had no stable employment. Few people in the community were even aware he was out of prison, as his return had gone unnoticed. Using cell phone tracking, the police discovered that he was hiding at a relative's house. Officers surrounded the area, but Rodrigo, realizing he was trapped, attempted to escape by climbing onto a nearby rooftop. After a tense standoff, he was captured. Disheveled and gaunt, he initially resisted and denied involvement, but the evidence against him, including Mariana's photo, surveillance footage, and tire tracks, was overwhelming. Eventually, he provided information on where Mariana could be found. The search for Mariana led investigators back to the sugarcane plantation where the car had been abandoned. Late the next morning, they made a devastating discovery. Mariana's body was found hidden about a mile from the car, concealed among the dense sugarcane stalks. She was gagged, blindfolded, and her hands were tied behind her back. The scene was heartbreaking. An autopsy performed revealed that her cause of death was strangulation. Her injuries were severe: bruises on her arms and legs, scratches on her face, and broken fingernails, all indicating she had fought desperately against her attacker. The autopsy also investigated the possibility of abuse, though the results remain inconclusive, as further testing was required. No stab wounds or gunshot injuries were found, ruling out the knife discovered in the car as a weapon. The coroner estimated that she had died within hours of her disappearance, likely between 8 a.m. and noon on September 24th. The presence of the bindings and gag indicated that she had been restrained before her death, suggesting a deliberate and brutal act. Rodrigo was charged with kidnapping, abuse, robbery, and murder as prosecutors built their case using physical evidence and his prior criminal record. The prosecution argued that he had used the pretense of offering help to gain Mariana's trust, overpowering her in the yard of the property. Investigators noted a clear pattern of impulsive and predatory behavior, consistent with his criminal past. But why was Rodrigo even in Bariri? It turned out he had obtained the job through a friend, claiming that it was part of a fresh start. Rodrigo admitted to luring Mariana to the chakra, stating that the incident happened on a whim. He claimed to have hitched a ride with her car after fixing her tire, then took her into his house and panicked when she tried to leave. However, investigators dismissed his claims of panic, labeling the act as cold and calculated. In early 2021, more than a year after Mariana was murdered on September 24, 2019, the trial of Rodrigo began at the Judicial Center near Bariri. The courtroom was filled with family, friends, locals, and media outlets, all focused on Rodrigo, a 39-year-old defendant who sat expressionless in the dock. The prosecution, led by experienced attorneys, aimed to prove that Rodrigo was a calculated predator. They presented critical evidence, including CCTV footage from the gym and a photo Mariana had sent to her boyfriend. The prosecution highlighted key points in their case. One piece of evidence was the flat tire on Mariana's car, believed to have been deliberately slashed, which, they argued, demonstrated premeditation. They painted Rodrigo as someone who targeted Mariana, manipulated her trust, and meticulously planned her abduction and murder. His criminal history became a focal point: 12 years in prison for kidnapping and attempted murder, having only recently been released before the crime occurred. The autopsy report was damning, describing strangulation, bruises, and defensive wounds that all suggested a violent struggle. The prosecution argued that Mariana was likely strangled with her own shirt during the attack. The defense faced a challenging case and employed strategies to cast doubt and downplay the prosecution's arguments. They highlighted gaps in the forensic evidence, emphasizing the absence of blood or DNA to conclusively prove abuse. They also claimed the knife found in the car could belong to anyone. Despite their efforts, it was clear the odds were against them. Mariana's family, including her parents, Ayrton and Marlene, as well as other relatives, attended all of the court proceedings, their grief evident on their faces. The prosecution called them as witnesses to testify about Mariana's character, portraying her vibrancy and the profound loss her death had caused. Marlene, her mother, described her daughter as their everything, highlighting that she was always smiling and always helping others. Jefferson, Mariana's boyfriend, also testified, tearfully recalling their last messages and the haunting photo she had sent him. He confessed emotionally to the court that he would never forgive himself for not realizing that she was in danger. The prosecution used the testimony to emphasize the manipulation and betrayal of trust that Rodrigo had committed against Mariana, a point that the jury had to consider. Another surveillance video captured Rodrigo leaning against Mariana's car before she left the gym, further supporting the claim that he had intentionally sabotaged her vehicle to trap her. Rodrigo's defense team did not contest his presence at the crime scene, that was undeniable. Instead, they focused on portraying him as mentally unstable, arguing that his 12 years in prison had left him impulsive and erratic, rather than a calculated killer. They did not deny the crime itself but tried to reduce its severity, aiming for a conviction of manslaughter rather than femicide to lessen his sentence. In March 2021, the court delivered its verdict. Rodrigo Pereira Alves was sentenced to 40 years, 10 months, and 18 days in prison. But the story didn't end there. Mariana's mother, Marlene, who had become a vocal advocate for preserving her daughter's memory, passed away in February 2022 at the age of 51. On September 23, 2024, just one day before the 5th anniversary of Mariana's murder, Rodrigo died from an unspecified illness in the intensive care unit of Boticata Hospital. While it was reported that he suffered from a chronic disease, details of his exact cause of death were not disclosed by the prison or the hospital. Bree Kristen Kuhn was born in May 1987 in the United States and grew up with her parents and her older brother, Eric. The family lived in Pennsylvania until her parents divorced. Following the divorce, Bree and Eric moved to Texas with their mother, whose name has not been disclosed. When Eric entered 9th grade, Bree left Texas to live with their father in New York. At that time, their father was in a new relationship with a woman named Karen. Though Bree and her brother Eric lived apart, they remained close, staying in touch on important occasions. However, their relationship with their mother became strained over time. According to Eric, their mother was physically abusive, and Bree would often defend him. She took on the role of a protector, enduring the abuse herself to keep her brother safe. These traumatic experiences profoundly affected Bree, leading her to struggle with depression and anxiety throughout her adolescence. By the age of 13, she had attempted to end her life. In the face of adversity, Bree focused on her education, attending 2 community colleges. While still young, she enlisted in the U.S. Navy, where she served for 17 years at various naval stations across the country. In 2009, she welcomed her first child, a daughter named Kay, with her then-partner, James. Although their relationship ended, Bree retained custody of Kay, while James was granted weekend visitation rights. She later began a relationship with Colin Turner, a fellow service member in the military. Colin James Turner, born on December 28, 1987, was raised in a close-knit, religious family alongside his parents, Tierva Donald Turner, and his sisters, Nicole and Rebecca. Known for his warmth and strong family values, Colin served in the Marine Corps with a specialization in explosive ordnance disposal. He married Casey Gatzman in 2009, and they had a son that same year. After the separation, custody of the children went to Casey, but Colin remained actively involved in his son's care and life. On May 29, 2016, Colin married Bree, and together they started a family with Bree's daughter, Kay. Colin embraced the role of Kay's father, treating her as his own, which deeply endeared her to his family. In April 2017, Bree and Colin welcomed their son, John Patrick, followed by their daughter, Lonnie, in August 2018. After 14 years of service, Colin retired from the Marines and began studying electrical engineering at Arizona State University. He also managed to balance his studies with his responsibilities as a parent, such as helping Kay with distance learning. By this time, the family had settled in Gulf Breeze, Florida, a community recognized for its safety and family-friendly environment. Despite outward appearances of stability, underlying issues were present in Bree and Colin's relationship. She confided to her brother, Eric, that her relationship with Colin was strained. When Eric visited to help mediate, Colin reportedly joked, both privately and in front of Bree, that they got along because they were both narcissistic psychopaths. Eric also noticed Bree felt burdened as the family's sole financial provider, while Colin focused on his studies and childcare. Although Eric encouraged Bree to leave the relationship, she hesitated. Her concerns include that Colin could use her mental health history and his family's finances to gain a legal advantage in a custody battle. In April 2021, she attempted to end her life by overdosing on pills and alcohol while speaking on the phone with Eric. Panicked, Eric contacted Colin, who was at home with Bree but reportedly did not help her. He ultimately called emergency services, and she was hospitalized in a psychiatric facility for 10 days. A month later, she returned to the facility for another week. During her recovery, Bree attributed much of her emotional distress to job-related stress and accused Colin of interfering with her work, which she said exacerbated her difficulties. However, she never publicly accused him of psychological, physical, or emotional abuse. After her hospitalization, she joined an intensive outpatient program and resumed her career at the Naval Air Station in Pensacola. In her role as an assistant to the command chief, Bree was able to continue her treatment while serving under limited-duty sailor status. In the months leading up to the tragedy, Bree began seeking legal assistance. On Wednesday, September 8, 2021, she reached out to a group of mothers on a messaging app, asking for recommendations for a lawyer. She mentioned that the situation could escalate, as it involved disputes over children and property. At 12:53 p.m. that same day, Bree called 911 to report a domestic dispute with her husband, Colin, and requested police assistance at their home. Within minutes, 2 officers arrived at the scene. Colin, her husband, was calmly sitting in a beach chair at the end of the driveway. He informed the officers that Bree had a shotgun, a pistol in the bedroom, and admitted that he also had a firearm in his truck. Colin emphasized that Bree was the one who had called the police. When the officers asked about her whereabouts, he led one of them to the home's entrance and pointed toward the kitchen. As the officer entered, Bree's young son approached, curiously asking about the officer's equipment. Shortly afterward, Bree appeared, looking visibly frustrated. The police officer explained that they could not intervene immediately unless there were obvious injuries or specific evidence of violence. Bree responded bitterly, sarcastically stating that she would make things clearer next time. The officer attempted to de-escalate the situation, explaining that without a court order or restraining order, they could not prevent Colin from seeing or taking the children, especially since 2 of them were biologically his. When asked if she wanted to file a formal complaint, she declined, saying she just wanted to leave the house with her children. The officer informed her that he would speak to Colin while she gathered her belongings. While the officers were speaking with Colin, Bree began transferring items from Colin's truck to hers. Noticing this, Colin firmly stated that he would not allow her to take the children. He argued that he was their primary caregiver and claimed that he intended to take them to his parents' home in Georgia for a few days to let tensions cool down. He also denied having any intention of keeping the children away from Bree. One of the officers advised Colin that, as long as no violence was involved, parenting disputes were not matters for police intervention. When asked if he wanted to file a formal report, he agreed. The officers retrieved paperwork from their patrol vehicle and provided forms to both parties. When Bree saw her form, she asked what she should do if her husband hit her after they left. The officer advised her to use her phone's camera to document any evidence. The officers then departed. A few hours later, around 5 p.m., there was another 911 call from their home, this time from Colin. When the police arrived again, they found Colin outside, holding the youngest child. He told the officers that Bree was refusing to let him back into the house. She then went outside and tried to take the child from his arms. The officers intervened and asked Bree to go back inside to allow for a calm discussion. After confirming that Colin lived in and co-owned the house, an officer informed him that he had the legal right to enter the property, though they discouraged him from using force. The officer emphasized that Colin's access to the home was a lawful right. Concerned about another confrontation, he requested that the officer accompany him inside. Colin explained that Bree had attempted to take the child into the house, but the child had started screaming, refusing to go in without him. When the officer asked if any physical conflict had occurred, Colin said no but mentioned that the situation was part of a long-standing dispute that had lasted for years. Bree, on the other hand, told the officers that they were discussing divorce and claimed Colin intended to take the children to Georgia. She further accused him of being physically aggressive, adding that the earlier police visit had failed to protect her. She also alleged that Colin had contacted her superiors at work and possibly made claims of emotional abuse. The officer reiterated to Bree that she could not legally prevent Colin from entering his own home. He suggested they work out a temporary arrangement, such as staying in separate bedrooms and minimizing contact, for the well-being of their children. However, Bree refused, expressing concern that allowing Colin inside could lead to more violence. She again brought up her previous allegations of abuse and expressed fear of being harmed. The officer advised her to document any future incidents, but it was clear Bree was seeking more than just advice. She wanted protection that the current system was not equipped to provide. When the officer suggested that everyone enter the house together, Bree refused. The officer then turned to Colin, who calmly provided the children's information. During the exchange, he mentioned Bree's mental health issues. Police confirmed this and said that he had previously intervened in an incident at their home in March, when Bree attempted to harm herself. Police reminded Colin of the same advice they had previously given him, to remain separated within the home for the safety of everyone involved. He also pointed out that standing outside in the intense heat with a small child amidst biting mosquitoes was unsustainable. Before heading inside again, Colin asked the officer to retrieve his wallet, which Bree had allegedly taken from his vehicle. At the door, Bree met the officer. When asked about the wallet, she denied having it and claimed she had only taken Colin's credit card. The officer reminded her that a wallet is personal property, not something to be shared in marriage, and instructed her to return it if she had taken it. In a calm but firm tone, the officer told Bree she had to allow Colin and their daughter back into the house. Bree agreed, but only on the condition that Colin would not harass her or the children. The officer reassured her that if anything happened, she could call them again. As the officer prepared to leave, he returned to inform Colin that Bree claimed she did not know where the wallet was. Colin just smiled and implied that he would let the matter slide. But in reality, nothing was resolved satisfactorily. Less than 2 hours later, at exactly 6:22 p.m., a third and final 911 call came from their residence. Colin James Turner, just 33 years old, had been fatally shot. The final fatal gunshot rang out while the 911 operator was still on the line. On the porch, officers found Bree, then 34, sitting calmly. As they approached, she spontaneously confessed that she had shot her husband. She was taken into custody without resistance. When asked about the children, she said she had taken them to a neighbor who lived a few houses down. Paramedics checked her over while officers ensured that she was physically stable. When asked if she could breathe properly or needed medical care, she didn't respond, so emergency personnel were instructed to evaluate her. Bree was brought to the police station for questioning. The interrogation was slow, interrupted by long silences and frequent bouts of crying. During the interview, Bree opened up about the state of her marital relationship. She said Colin was the primary caregiver for their children and admitted that she believed she had little chance of winning custody due to her history of mental health struggles. She revealed that Colin had threatened to take the children to Georgia and had physically assaulted her. He had also warned that if she reported him, no one would believe her because of her mental health issues, calling her crazy. Bree confessed that she had removed the batteries from the garage door opener to stop Colin from leaving with the children. She claimed that Colin only pretended to care about her mental health as a way to manipulate her, especially after she decided to file for divorce. She mentioned that she had a legal appointment scheduled for the next day. She also mentioned that she had an appointment with a lawyer scheduled for the next day. When asked what had happened just before the attack, Bree said her memory after the second police visit was hazy. She recalled Colin attempting to enter the house through the garage but failing because the way was blocked. However, she said he then used a side door to enter the house. She claimed she tried to stop him, but her next clear memory was knocking on a neighbor's door. She remembered leaving her children there to ensure their safety before returning home to help her husband. Investigators pressed her for a more comprehensive account, but she could only provide scattered details. She said she returned to the garage and saw blood everywhere. Throughout the questioning, Bree repeatedly asked to call her father. Eventually, she was allowed to make the call, which lasted 18 minutes and consisted mostly of sobbing. Her father tried to comfort her, suggesting she would likely spend the night in jail and urging her to seek help if she felt like harming herself again. He reassured her that things could improve and told her to stay strong and look for hope. Toward the end of the call, Bree asked if her father could take custody of her two youngest children. He didn't give a definitive answer, suggesting instead that they would need to discuss it with Colin's mother. He also advised her to cooperate with a public defender if necessary until a more suitable legal option became available. At the end of the call, Bree painfully confesses, she doesn't know what's worse, knowing that Colin is dead or realizing that she was the one who killed him. A month later, in early October 2021, Bree was indicted by a Santa Rosa County grand jury for first-degree premeditated murder in connection to the death of her husband, Colin. Prosecutors had not yet decided whether to seek life imprisonment or the death penalty. On October 16, Colin's family and friends gathered for a military funeral to honor his 14 years of service in the U.S. Marine Corps. During the ceremony, the American flag symbolizing his service was presented to his eldest son, Brody Turner. The youngest children of his were adopted by his parents, who always strived to love and support him despite enduring an irreparable loss. After 3 years of delays, Bree's long-awaited trial began on Tuesday, September 24, 2024, at the Santa Rosa County Courthouse. Now 37 years old, Bree faced accusations of committing a premeditated and calculated act of murder. The prosecution carefully outlined the events of September 8, 2021, arguing that Bree intentionally killed her husband following a day of escalating conflict. Meanwhile, the defense presented a drastically different narrative, asserting that Bree was a victim of battered woman syndrome. They argued that she had endured years of psychological and emotional abuse from Colin, who had become increasingly unstable after suffering a traumatic brain injury during his military service. The defense maintained that he posed a significant threat to her and their children. Over 4 days, the court heard testimony from various witnesses. The jury and those in the courtroom reviewed full body cam footage from responding officers, which captured their interactions on the day of the incident. The recordings revealed Bree's sarcasm, Colin's calm demeanor, and the chilling 911 call during which gunshots were recorded in real time. Every officer involved testified, including one officer who described the crime scene in detail, recounting the site of the garage, blood, Colin's body slumped in a chair, and a holstered weapon nearby. A crime scene analyst presented a series of photographs to help jurors visualize where Colin's body was found. Evidence collected included shell casings, bullet fragments, and Colin's phone, which was still connected to the 911 operator, lying beneath him. Prescriptions for Bree's attention deficit hyperactivity disorder and mental health treatment were submitted as evidence, along with testimony from her supervisor, Craig Forum, from the Pensacola Naval Station. Craig explained that Bree had been placed on limited duty due to mental health issues. He said that on the day of the shooting, Bree did not show up for work, and Colin called him to inform him that Bree had cut off the family's financial access and damaged the electronics in the house. Colin also told Craig that she had missed therapy sessions and that he was considering moving the children to Georgia. Craig testified that Colin remained calm and spoke in a composed manner throughout the call. He also provided Colin with contact information for a family counselor. Soon after, he spoke to Bree, who accused her husband of lying and being unreasonable in taking the children away. On the trial's second day, forensic pathologist Dr. Diana Oleski was called to testify for the prosecution. Although she did not personally perform Colin's autopsy, she reviewed the results and formed her conclusion. The autopsy revealed that Colin had been shot 4 times, all from behind. The bullets entered between his shoulders and chest. One particularly devastating shot passed through his left shoulder, exited the side of his neck, and lodged in his right wrist. The injuries caused extensive trauma, including punctured lungs, fractured ribs, damage to cervical vertebrae, a ruptured spleen, spinal cord injuries, and damage to the pericardium, the heart's protective membrane. Diana concluded that Colin would have survived for only a few minutes following the pericardial injury. When the defense attorney asked if there was any evidence to indicate that Colin's arm was broken, since he had claimed during the 911 call that Bree had tried to break his arm, Diana responded that there were no signs of injuries consistent with that statement. Eric, Bree's brother, was the next to testify. He recounted a phone conversation with Bree months earlier, on the day she attempted to end her life. During that call, she told him she had taken pills mixed with alcohol. Eric stated that when he informed Colin of this, Colin showed no concern and took no action to help, prompting Eric to step in and call for assistance. Eric also mentioned that Bree had always feared losing her children, believing Colin's family's wealth and legal resources would work against her. On the day of the attack, Eric said Bree was especially anxious because she had an upcoming surgery and feared that Colin would use that time to take the children. He recalled speaking to Bree several times that day, noting her mood alternated between calm and distressed. During their final 45-minute call, Eric said he overheard Bree arguing with Colin, followed by shouting and the sound of objects being thrown. He claimed that Bree had then picked up a weapon. When asked how Eric knew this, he hesitated, saying he believed Bree had told him. Eric begged her to leave with the children, but she didn't listen. The call ended with Bree saying that she was not going to take the kids, followed by the sound of gunshots, crying children, and Bree repeatedly saying that she had killed him and that she needed to call the police. However, Eric's testimony was inconsistent under cross-examination. His account differed from his initial statements to detectives in Pennsylvania. He attributed these contradictions to the claim that his first interview had not been recorded, a claim the detective denied. With that, the prosecution rested its case. The defense initially planned to present Bree's defense through testimony from a mental health expert and Bree herself to explain battered woman syndrome. However, they unexpectedly changed strategy, opting not to present these testimonies and offering no public explanation for their decision. Instead, the defense called James, Bree's ex-husband and the father of her eldest daughter, Kay. James testified about the incident on the day of the shooting. He stated that he exchanged text messages with Colin and later received a phone call from Bree. During the call, Bree had told him that he needed to come get Kay and that she had just shot Colin. When he had asked why, she had responded that she didn't know. James immediately went to pick up his daughter. James also testified in court that he had always thought highly of Colin as a stepfather and that Kay had spoken positively about him. On the third day of the trial, proceedings were interrupted by a hurricane warning, delaying closing arguments until Friday, September 27th. During the prosecution's closing argument, they emphasized that Bree showed no visible injuries on the day of the shooting. They argued that Bree deliberately provoked Colin, secretly filmed the confrontation on her phone, and kept her brother on the line during the incident. They contended that her motive was not self-defense but a desire to assert control. The prosecution concluded that, being unable to provoke aggression from Colin, Bree attacked him 4 times in the back without realizing he was on a 911 call. The defense argued that Colin had been walking around the house with a firearm and suggested he hid the weapon in his truck before police arrived. They referenced Colin's 911 call, where he claimed Bree tried to break his arm, a claim contradicted by the autopsy. One of the defense attorneys mocked Colin's actions during the call, asserting that, as a Marine, he should have handled the situation differently, further implying that his response would have been ridiculed by others in his military unit. The defense ultimately claimed that Bree resorted to attacking Colin because law enforcement had repeatedly failed to protect her despite her pleas for help. The jury deliberated for just 4 hours before returning a guilty verdict. During the sentencing hearing, the judge allowed Colin's parents to speak about the impact of the incident. Colin's mother expressed gratitude for having custody of her grandchildren and stated her intent to adopt them. She condemned Bree not only for taking her son's life but also for attempting to tarnish his reputation. Colin's father spoke of his sadness and disappointment in Bree's actions, sharing that the children were doing well in school and surrounded by love. The judge then sentenced Bree Kristen Kuhn to life in prison. Although the verdict has been announced, the case is not over yet. On October 3, 2024, Bree's legal team filed an appeal with the Florida Court of Appeals, challenging her conviction and requesting a new trial. Meanwhile, Bree was discharged from the U.S. Navy with a general discharge under honorable conditions after 17 years of service, thus avoiding further military disciplinary action. Jonathan Candy was a 42-year-old engineer working with the Oklahoma City basketball team. He focused on equipment maintenance and had developed his career over many years, first in sports and then in technical fields, which allowed him to support his family comfortably. In 2024, he had been married for 10 years to his wife, Lindsay Candy, who was 39. They lived in Yukon, Oklahoma, a small, quiet suburb with a population of over 20,000. They had 4 children, Dylan, 18, Ethan, 14, Lucas, 12, and their youngest child, who was just 10. The identity of the 10-year-old was kept private due to his young age and vulnerability. In the spring of 2024, this 10-year-old boy is about to experience a tragic event, an event that will greatly impact his life and those around him. The Candy family was viewed as a model American family, friendly and tight-knit. They have built a strong influence in the community, raising their children in one of the safest and most beautiful suburbs of the state. At that time, Ethan and Lucas were in school, in the 9th and 6th grades, respectively. Meanwhile, Dylan had graduated from high school in 2023 and was preparing for adulthood. He planned to attend college and had found a job to save money while applying to various schools. The Candy family did not have any mental health issues. Their upbringing was stable and uneventful. There were no instances of running away from home, and the parents maintained a peaceful household, allowing their children the freedom to make choices. This environment contributed to a thriving atmosphere at home, where the kids grew up feeling strong, sociable, and loved. They were always supportive of each other and even appeared in a local bakery advertisement, where they were regular customers and shared their favorite meals. Jonathan and Lindsay worked hard to help their children prepare for the future and lead fulfilling lives. However, behind this seemingly happy facade, a terrible situation is unfolding that will create a nightmare on Willow Street. On the evening of April 21, 2024, a Sunday, the whole family gathered at home. The older children spent time with their friends but returned home early to prepare for school the next day and to go to bed on time. Everything seemed normal for the Candy family, and no one anticipated the shocking incident that was about to occur. After dinner, Jonathan went to bed, and each child settled into their own room on the second floor. Later that night, the children overheard Jonathan and Lindsay arguing in the living room on the first floor. Although the specifics of their argument were unclear, it escalated dangerously. Despite the tension, everyone remained calm and went to bed. The youngest boy, whose fan was running, could hardly hear the commotion below. Meanwhile, a tragedy unfolded on the first floor that resulted in the deaths of 5 family members. But what exactly happened, and who was responsible for this horrific crime? In conversations with the only surviving family member, more details emerged after the incident. The fire alarm went off, which forensic experts determined was caused by gunpowder fumes from the shooting. The noise startled the youngest child, who didn't understand what was happening or why the alarm was sounding. Curious, he left his room to investigate, completely unprepared for the horrific scene he was about to encounter. As he stepped into the hallway, he noticed that the doors to his brother's rooms were open. Ordinarily, this might have seemed odd, but he thought everyone had gotten up due to the alarm. He made his way downstairs to the first floor and noticed a light on. He called out for his parents but received no answer. He then called his brothers, but all he got was the continuous beeping of the warning. Hoping to find answers, the boy went to the living room. The first thing he saw was blood splattered on the walls and furniture. In the center of the room lay his mother and father in large pools of blood. His father was sprawled on top of his mother, having suffered a gunshot wound to the head. The boy was terrified and in shock. He rushed to his father, trying to wake him up, not fully grasping what had happened. He saw the bullet holes and felt his parents grow cold, but he refused to believe they were dead. Despite shaking his father repeatedly, there were no signs of life. His mother did not respond either. In a moment of desperation, he called out for his brothers, still unaware that he was the only survivor. Overwhelmed with grief, he cried and collapsed onto his parents' lifeless bodies. He then walked through his brother's room and saw an identical, horrifying scene. Blood was everywhere, and there were no signs of life. Eventually, he realized he needed to call for help. Summoning his courage, he reached out to a rescue worker and requested assistance. This initiated a horrifying sequence of incidents that would lead to a deeper investigation into this unimaginable tragedy. When law enforcement and paramedics arrived, they quickly realized that nothing could be done. The family had been dead for several hours, as indicated by the rigor mortis and the state of the blood on the floor. The parents and older brothers were declared dead at the scene, and the house was cordoned off for investigation. Forensic experts and detectives, horrified, began to reconstruct the scene of the brutal massacre. The idea of an outsider attacking the family was quickly dismissed, as there were no signs of forced entry or any outsiders present. This raised concerns that the murders had been committed by a family member. At some point, the 10-year-old boy was found to be covered in blood, leading police to consider whether he might have been involved. However, his behavior, condition, age, and the evidence quickly eliminated any doubt. There were no traces of gunpowder on his hands, and no fingerprints on the weapon. Forensic experts thoroughly examined the windows and doors and found no signs of staging. Everything in the house was intact, with no valuables disturbed or missing. They reviewed street surveillance footage and only saw the family members returning from the store that evening. No one else had entered or left the house before the police's arrival. The boy mentioned hearing his parents scream before he fell asleep. Since the weapon was found next to the body of Jonathan, the boy's father, it was clear that the father had committed a crime against his family before harming himself. As investigators analyzed the crime scene, it became evident how ruthless and cold-blooded 42-year-old Jonathan had been. The motive behind his actions remained unclear. The police could not determine the cause of the conflict, as no suicide notes were found in the house. They needed to analyze the mobile phones and computers of all family members, which were seized immediately, hoping to uncover new information. However, a complete analysis would take time. It remains a puzzling question why a loving father, who seems to be a good family man, would kill his wife and children but spare his youngest son. The weapon used in the crime was taken for examination, confirming that all members of Candy's family, including Jonathan, were shot with the same gun. Only Jonathan's fingerprints were found on the handle, ruling out the involvement of anyone else in the attack. Notably, none of the victims, including Lindsay, showed any signs of defensive injuries, suggesting that Jonathan's violent outburst was completely unexpected and uncontrollable, leaving no one time to react or defend themselves. Lindsay, who did not die instantly, bled on the living room floor while Jonathan, upstairs, methodically killed their sleeping children. It is believed that Lindsay heard the commotion but was powerless to intervene. Detectives considered the incident to be highly unusual. Friends and relatives found it hard to believe that a devoted father and loving husband like Jonathan could commit such an atrocity. He had no criminal record, and police had never been called to their home for domestic disturbances. Initially, investigators considered other possibilities, such as robbery or an attack by a stranger, but none of these theories added up. The family was well-liked and had no enemies, and Jonathan seemed incapable of such violence. Investigations cleared Jonathan of any doubts regarding his innocence. Officers interviewed relatives and neighbors to find potential explanations for the tragedy. Those close to the family described them as friendly and problem-free, with Jonathan being a respected community member who avoided criminal behavior. His service record was impeccable, and he was seen as calm and non-confrontational. The suddenness of the incident deeply shocked his relatives, as there had been no warning signs leading up to it. While some considered Jonathan a psychopath, they acknowledged that although disagreements between him and his wife occurred occasionally, they were rare and never involved violence. People struggled to accept his guilt, and as police statements regarding the investigation emerged, confusion set in. The community sought answers to the questions raised by the media, eagerly seeking clarity amidst the turmoil. On the day of the tragedy, Candy's family did not reach out to relatives or friends. They spent time together just once, going to the store for groceries, after which the older children left home to meet their friends. Nevertheless, they all reunited in the evening. The youngest child was unaware of any issues. It felt like a regular day. Jonathan remained calm and did not show any signs of anger. An alarming piece of information came from Michael Buru, a neighbor of the Andy family, who revealed that Jonathan had often helped him with construction and household tasks before the tragedy. They maintained a close relationship and even talked about personal matters. Michael mentioned that Jonathan once confided in him about his struggles, admitting he was dealing with depression and was taking medication prescribed by a doctor. However, Jonathan suggested that he had overcome his illness and that his depression had improved. He claimed to feel fine and had no lingering negativity toward his spouse, attributing his previous unhappiness to his mental state. After that conversation, no one heard him mention a relapse. There were no incidents indicating a return of his depressive symptoms. Investigators reviewed Jonathan's medical records but found nothing new. He had not sought help from psychiatrists or psychologists in recent times. If there had been any changes in Jonathan's condition, they would likely have been noticeable in his behavior. However, the investigation hit a dead end because no one reported anything suspicious. Some family members were aware of Jonathan's past depression, which had been resolved years ago, but they expressed no concern about his current state. Jonathan's mother mentioned that he had quickly overcome his illness and that his depression had not negatively impacted family relationships. Rather, his wife had supported him throughout. People close to Candy's family did not perceive Jonathan's struggles as serious. After overcoming his depression, he seemed to be part of a normal, happy family. The detectives found no additional leads. Was it possible that Jonathan experienced a resurgence of depression? If so, was he keeping it hidden? This was the only potential explanation for what had happened and could provide a motive. However, psychiatrists noted that it would be very difficult to hide such a condition given their active social life. Lindsay and Jonathan regularly spent time with their children, enjoying a vibrant lifestyle filled with barbecues and social gatherings. Their last barbecue event took place on Saturday, April 20th, at Michael's house, where neither Jonathan nor his wife displayed any signs of conflict. What occurred in their home did not align with the existing narrative. More information was needed, but it was lacking. There was hope that insights from mobile phones and computers could reveal important clues. There was a suspicion that jealousy might have played a role in the murder. However, even this line of investigation yielded little. The initial examination revealed no significant findings. Jonathan and his wife communicated regularly on social media, but their conversations appeared to be friendly, without any signs of intrigue or infidelity. Consequently, any theories about betrayal had to be set aside until a thorough analysis of their correspondence could be conducted. Additionally, Lindsay and Jonathan conducted routine searches online, but nothing concerning emerged. The main witness for the police in the case was a 10-year-old boy who, for unknown reasons, had been taken in by his maternal relatives. Many compassionate individuals wanted to help him deal with his trauma, leading to the creation of a fund aimed at raising $100,000 for his support. By the fall of 2024, the fund had already collected over $74,000, and donations were still pouring in. During the spring, the boy attracted attention not only from those offering emotional and financial support, but also from law enforcement officers conducting investigations. The police did not speak to him immediately, recognizing that he was in shock and struggling to cope with his traumatic experience. Despite his young age, he was very aware of the horrific event that had claimed the lives of his loved ones. Initially, the boy had trouble sleeping, often waking up screaming and in tears. Multiple psychologists worked with him after he once expressed that he did not want to live. His relatives rallied around him, helping to ease the effects of his severe trauma, but he still faced many challenges ahead. Experts concluded that the boy could meet with the police to provide them with important information, so a child psychologist was brought in to ensure he felt safe and comfortable during the conversation. The psychologist collaborated with investigators to create a list of topics that would be least traumatic for the child. However, despite their efforts, what the boy shared mirrored what others familiar with his family had reported. He struggled to understand why his father had committed such a violent act. He recalled hearing his parents arguing before bedtime, but he could not comprehend the details. A fan was running in the room, drowning out the sounds of the argument, and eventually, he fell asleep, unaware of the tragedy that was unfolding. The boy also confirmed that Jonathan was never cruel or aggressive. He had never hurt his children or his wife, Lindsay. Detectives wanted to know why no one else reacted to the shooting that began inside the house. The other children must have heard their mother's screams, yet they were fast asleep and were shot during the night. It seemed as though fate was on the side of evil. Jonathan used a small-caliber pistol, which is relatively quiet, and forensic experts suggested this might explain why neighbors didn't notice anything during such a quiet time of day. However, it was puzzling that none of the children in the house woke up or heard anything until it was too late. The younger child mentioned that fans were running in every room, which might have muffled the sounds of the shots. Despite the police's efforts, they could not gather new information from the child. The detectives had to ask him some uncomfortable questions regarding the incident, the positions of the bodies, and the bloodshed. Eventually, the boy became anxious and began to cry. The child psychologist decided to halt the questioning to prevent further distress for the boy, leaving the detectives without any new leads. Relatives reported that after meeting with the police, the boy became even more anxious. Psychologists were worried about how to help him deal with this new trauma, as he had just begun to recover from his previous experiences. The police's questioning raised feelings of fear, despair, and helplessness once again. Consequently, they decided not to push him further and to avoid drawing media attention to him. Journalists, being less sensitive, made it more challenging for the boy to maintain his privacy. However, through collective efforts, they managed to secure confidentiality for him. Despite the presence of an expert during the police interview with the boy, it appeared to have a detrimental effect on him. During this time, he stayed with his aunt, who became his official guardian. It is expected that once the fund raises enough money, she will receive financial support to help her nephew address his mental health issues. He continues to suffer from frequent panic attacks, disrupted sleep, and nightmares that have not improved. His aunt believes that the fund should not only cover rehabilitation but also ensure that he can pursue an education and rebuild his life. While this support may seem like a weak consolation and cannot bring back his loved ones, he must navigate a long and challenging recovery with the help of those close to him. Investigators were able to reconstruct the events surrounding the tragedy. It began after an argument between Jonathan and Lindsay escalated, leading him to grab a weapon. He first shot his wife, Lindsay, severely injuring her. She fell to the floor, bleeding but still alive. Jonathan, still armed, was consumed by rage as he entered the children's rooms. He encountered his 18-year-old son, Dylan, and attacked him on the head without hesitation. Dylan was using earplugs, likely to avoid being disturbed by the argument. It's possible that had he not been wearing them, the outcome might have been different. The fatal shot instantly claimed Dylan's life. Jonathan then moved to Ethan's room, where he also attacked his child on the head. The same tragic fate befell his 12-year-old son, Lucas. Only the youngest son, who is 10 years old, survived. The reasons for this remain unclear. Perhaps the father felt pity for the youngest, or he miscalculated and mistakenly overlooked his room. Jonathan went downstairs and returned to the living room. It seemed he understood what had happened, so he ended his life. On April 23rd, a group made up of people who cared for the family and the surviving child came to pay their respects. 39-year-old Lindsay was remembered as a devoted mother and loving wife. As a housewife, she did everything she could to ensure her children were comfortable. 18-year-old Dylan was described as a kind young man who supported his family and was always there for his loved ones. Intelligent and strong, he was a source of support for his friends. The family and friends are heartbroken by this tremendous loss. The youngest victim, 12-year-old Lucas, was unaware that the real threat to his life came from someone close to him. Jonathan will be remembered as a good father and husband, recognized for his ability to uplift spirits and make others laugh. Many struggled to believe that he could commit such an act. Although they acknowledged the evidence against him, they speculated that he was in a state of altered consciousness or psychosis that he couldn't control. At the last press conference, the detectives reported that there can be no doubt that the killer of the Candy family was Jonathan. However, by this time, there was no other information. The only thing the forensic scientist managed to achieve was to cross out any other suspects from the list. Unfortunately, even after several months, nothing new was found out, and the exact reason for the attack remains unknown.